Welcome back to Chapters Unfolded. It's great to have you back with us as we continue our journey through Atomic Habits. You're joining us for part 4, where we'll really start to unpack the mechanics of how habits work. We're diving into Chapter 3, and trust me, this is where things get really interesting.
Absolutely. If you're ready to go beyond just knowing what habits are and really grasp why your brain creates them and how you can actually change your behavior,
Yeah.
you're in the right place.
Okay, so before we get into nitty-gritty, let's set the scene with a little thought experiment. Imagine you're stuck in one of those classic puzzle boxes, just like the cats in Edward Thorndike's 1898 experiment.
Ah, yes, Thorndike's Cats, a classic. I always find it so fascinating.
Right, so picture this. You're in this box feeling totally lost. You're trying everything to escape, but nothing seems to work. Then suddenly, bam, you accidentally hit a lever and the door swings open, revealing not only freedom, but also a delicious reward.
Now, here's the question. Do you think you'd remember that lever for next time? Of course you would. Our brains are hardwired to seek out pleasure and avoid pain. That's the very foundation of habit formation.
I love how clear Lou used this example because it perfectly illustrates how our brains are constantly searching for those shortcuts, those little hacks that make life easier.
Exactly, and that's precisely what Thorndike observed. He noticed that as the cats repeatedly escaped the puzzle boxes, they got faster, more efficient. Their behavior shifted from random frantic movements to a targeted approach. Why? Because they learned that pressing the lever brought a satisfying reward.
It's like their brains were saying, hey, this lever thing works, let's remember that for next time. And that's essentially what habits are, aren't they? Learned solutions to recurring problems.
You got it. Habits are essentially mental shortcuts that free up our brains to focus on other things.
So let's talk about how these mental shortcuts actually get formed. Clear introduces this brilliant concept called the habit loop. It almost sounds mystical, doesn't it?
It does. But the science behind it is actually very straightforward. The habit loop is a 4-stage cycle that our brains go through whenever a habit is formed.
Okay, I'm ready. Break it down for me. What are those 4 stages?
The first stage is the cue. Think of it as a trigger, a signal that alerts your brain to initiate a specific behavior. It's like a starting pistol that sets the habit in motion.
So for example, if I'm trying to build a habit of drinking more water, the cue could be placing a full water bottle on my desk first thing in the morning.
Exactly. By making the cue, in this case, the water bottle, obvious, visible, you're increasing the likelihood of triggering the desired behavior.
Okay, that makes sense. So the cue sets the stage, but what drives us to actually perform the habit, that's where the second stage comes in, right? The craving.
Yes, the craving is the motivational force behind the habit. It's the desire, the urge to change your internal state. And what's important to remember is that you're not craving the habit itself, but rather the feeling or reward it provides.
So it's not about like wanting to go for a run. It's about wanting to feel that runner's high or the sense of accomplishment afterward.
That's a great way to put it. Or it's not about craving to meditate, but rather desiring that feeling of calmness and mental clarity it brings.
That's such an important distinction. It's not the habit itself, but the feeling it delivers.
And this is where things get really interesting because what triggers a powerful craving in one person might be completely unnoticed by another. It's incredibly individual.
Yeah, I can see that. For instance, a ringing slot machine might be irresistible to a gambler, but just background noise to someone else.
Right. Our past experiences, genetics, even our current environment all play a role in shaping what we crave.
Okay, so we have the cue, the craving,
Yeah.
and that leads us to the third stage, the response. This is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is where we actually perform the habit.
You got it. The response is the action or thought we take as a result of the cue and craving. It can be something physical, like going for a run, or something mental, like visualizing a successful presentation.
And this is where our ability and motivation really come into play, don't they? I mean, if the response is too difficult or if we're not truly motivated, we're less likely to follow through.
Absolutely. It's like wanting to write a novel, but feeling overwhelmed by the sheer size of the task. You might have the cue, a blank page, and the craving to become a published author, but if the response feels too daunting, you'll likely procrastinate.
So making the response as easy and manageable as possible is crucial, especially when building new habits.
Absolutely. We'll talk more about that when we delve into the 4 laws of behavior change. But for now, let's move on to the final stage of the habit loop, the reward. This, the payoff, the reason we do it all, right?
Yeah. The reward satisfies our cravings and teaches us which actions are worth remembering and repeating. It's like our brain giving us a little pat on the back saying, good job, that felt good. Let's do that again sometime.
I love that. And it's so true. Rewards are essential because they close the loop, reinforce the entire cycle. Without the reward, the habit wouldn't stick.
So the reward is like the glue that holds the entire habit loop together.
Precisely. And the more satisfying the reward, the stronger the habit becomes.
This is all starting to make so much sense. But I have to ask, do habits limit our freedom, or do they actually create more freedom? Because on one hand, they can feel a bit restrictive, like we're stuck in these automated loops. But on the other hand, I can see how good habits could actually free up our mental energy for more important things.
That's a great question. It's one that a lot of people grapple with. It's true that bad habits can feel incredibly limiting. They can keep us stuck in negative patterns and prevent us from reaching our full potential. But the flip side is that good habits can be incredibly liberating.
How so?
Well, think about it this way. When your basic habits are dialed in, things like waking up on time, eating healthy, exercising regularly, you've essentially automated those behaviors. You don't have to expend mental energy thinking about them or forcing yourself to do them. They simply become part of your routine.
It's like having a well-oiled machine running in the background so you can focus on driving the car.
Exactly. With those basic needs taken care of, you have more mental bandwidth, more to devote to more meaningful pursuits. Your passions, your relationships, your creative endeavors. That's where true freedom lies.
Wow, that's a really insightful perspective. It's not about being restricted by habits. It's about choosing the right habits that will ultimately free us to live more fulfilling lives.
Exactly. And that brings us to the really exciting part. Because once we understand the habit loop, we can start to consciously design our habits, using what James Clear calls the 4 laws of behavior change.
Oh, this is where we get tactical. The 4 laws sound like a secret code to unlock better habits.
They are. And they're surprisingly simple. To build a good habit, you need to make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. And to break a bad habit, well, you simply invert these laws.
So to break a bad habit, we would make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying.
You got it. And these laws can be applied to virtually any habit you want to change.
Okay. I am so ready to dive into these 4 laws. They sound incredibly powerful.
They are. And we'll be exploring each one in detail as we continue our deep dive. But for now, it's enough to remember that they provide a practical framework for shaping our behavior, designing the lives we want.
This is already giving me so much to think about. It's amazing how much insight we can gain by simply understanding how habits
Oh,
work.
all right. And the best part is, this knowledge empowers us to take control of our lives, design the future we want.
I love that. This is exactly the kind of stuff we love to unpack here on Chapters Unfolded. And speaking of unpacking, we're just getting started. When we come back, we'll be diving deep into the 4 laws of behavior change and exploring how we can use them to build good habits and break bad ones. So stay tuned.
And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Chapters Unfolded for more deep dives into the books that are shaping our lives. We'll be right back after a quick break.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork with the habit loop. Now I'm ready to get tactical, really start putting this knowledge into practice.
Yeah, me too. This is where the rubber meets the road. Let's dive into those 4 laws of behavior change.
Okay, hit me with the first law. How do we make a good habit obvious?
Well, think back to the cue. It's the trigger that sets the whole habit loop in motion. So if you want to build a good habit, you need to make that cue as obvious as possible. It's like sending your brain a giant flashing neon sign saying, hey, time to do this thing.
Haha, I love that analogy. So instead of just hoping I'll remember to meditate, I might put my meditation cushion right in the middle of the living room where I can't miss it.
Perfect example. You're essentially hijacking your environment to work for you, not against you. Clear talks about something called implementation intentions, which is basically a fancy way of saying plan ahead and be specific. So instead of vaguely thinking I should meditate more, you'd say, I will meditate for 10 minutes every morning at 7 a.m. in my living room.
That's so much more powerful. It takes the guesswork out of it. I'm already starting to see how I can apply this to some of my own goals. But what if we're dealing with a habit that doesn't have a super obvious cue? Like, how do we make something like being more mindful obvious?
That's a great question. It highlights the importance of habit stacking. This is one of my favorite strategies from the book. The idea is to link your new habit to an existing habit that already has a strong cue. So let's say you already have a solid habit of brushing your teeth every morning. You could stack being more mindful onto that by deciding to focus on your breath while you brush.
I see. So the act of brushing my teeth becomes the cue for the mindfulness practice. It's brilliant. Okay, so we've made the cue obvious. What's the second law? How do we make a habit attractive?
This is where we tap into our desires and make the habit appealing. Remember, our brains are wired to seek out pleasure and avoid pain. So we need to make our good habits as tempting as those bad habits that seem to hook us so effortlessly.
Yeah, it's like we're competing with all those instant gratification dopamine hits that we get from things like social media or junk food.
Exactly. And one powerful way to make good habits more attractive is through temptation bundling. This is where we link a habit we want to do with a habit we need to do.
Ooh, tell me more about this temptation bundling. It sounds intriguing.
Okay, let's say you love listening to podcasts, but you also want to start exercising more. You could bundle those two habits together by only allowing yourself to listen to your favorite podcasts while you're working out. Suddenly, exercise becomes a lot more enticing.
I love that. It's like giving yourself permission to indulge in something you enjoy, but only while you're also doing something that's good for you.
Exactly. And another way to make habits more attractive is to focus on the benefits, not just the mechanics. It's about shifting your mindset from I have to I get to. So instead of thinking, ugh, I have to go to the gym, you could reframe it as I get to move my body and feel energized today.
Ah, I love that shift in perspective.
Yeah.
It's about finding the joy in the process, not just the end result.
Yes, it's about making the journey itself enjoyable.
Okay, we've made the cue obvious. We've made the habit attractive.
Yeah.
What's the third law? How do we make it easy?
This one's all about reducing friction, making the habit as effortless as possible. The easier it is to perform the habit, the more likely you are to stick with it. Clear talks about the 2-minute rule, which basically says that you should start by making your new habit so easy that it takes less than 2 minutes to do.
2 minutes. That seems almost too simple, but I'm intrigued.
I know, but think about it. If you're trying to build a habit of reading more, you don't have to start by reading a whole chapter every night. You could simply start by reading for 2 minutes before bed.
And once those 2 minutes become a habit, you can gradually increase the time.
Exactly. It's all about starting small and building momentum. Another great strategy for making habits easy is to optimize your environment. So if you want to eat healthier, make sure you have plenty of healthy snacks readily available.
Or if you want to start flossing regularly, keep your floss right next to your toothbrush where you can't miss it.
Precisely. By making the desired behavior as convenient as possible, you're increasing the likelihood that you'll actually do it.
This is brilliant. I'm already starting to see my entire house as a giant habit-building playground. But what about the final law, the one that really solidifies the loop? How do we make a habit satisfying?
This is where we make sure the habit provides some sense of pleasure, reward, accomplishment. Remember, our brains are wired to seek out those good feelings, and that's what keeps us coming back for more.
So, after a great workout, I could treat myself to a relaxing bath or listen to my favorite music.
That's a great example. By associating the habit with positive feelings, you're strengthening the loop, making it more likely to stick. Another great way to make habits satisfying is to track your progress. That's something incredibly motivating about seeing your wins, no matter how small.
Oh, I'm a huge fan of habit tracking. I use an app to track my workouts, and it's so satisfying to see those little green check marks adding up over time.
It's like giving yourself a visual reminder of your commitment and progress. And another powerful strategy is to celebrate your wins, even the small ones. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just a little something to acknowledge your efforts and reinforce the positive feelings associated with the habit.
So instead of beating myself up for missing a workout, I could focus on celebrating the fact that I went for a walk earlier in the week.
Exactly. It's about shifting your focus from what you didn't do to what you did do. And it's about recognizing that every small step forward is a victory worth celebrating.
This is so incredibly helpful. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for building good habits. But what about breaking bad habits? How do these laws apply in reverse?
That's where the inversions come in. To break a bad habit, you want to make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying.
Okay, let's break this down. How do we make a bad habit invisible?
Remember how we talked about optimizing your environment to make good habits more obvious? Well, the same principle applies here, but in reverse. If you're trying to break a bad habit, you want to remove the cues that trigger that habit.
So if I'm trying to cut back on social media, I might delete the apps from my phone, making the cue the app icon invisible.
Exactly. Or if you're trying to resist the temptation to snack on junk food, you might remove all the unhealthy snacks from your pantry and replace them with healthier options.
Out of sight, out of mind. Right.
Precisely. By removing the visual cues, you're reducing the likelihood of triggering the habit in the first place. And speaking of triggers, Let's talk about how to make a bad habit unattractive.
Okay, lay it on me. How do we make those tempting bad habits suddenly seem less appealing?
One powerful strategy is to reframe your mindset. Instead of focusing on the immediate gratification that the bad habit provides, try to highlight the negative consequences. For example, if you're trying to quit smoking, you might remind yourself of the long-term health risks or the financial costs.
Yeah, it's like shifting your focus from the short-term pleasure to the long-term pain.
Exactly. And another effective technique is to find a healthy substitute for the bad habit. So, if you're trying to break a habit of stress eating, you might find a new coping mechanism, like going for a walk, talking to a friend, or listening to calming music.
It's about finding a healthier way to meet that underlying need.
Exactly. It's about addressing the root cause, not just the symptom.
All right, we've made it invisible, we've made it unattractive. Now, how do we make it difficult?
This one's all about adding friction, making the bad habit as inconvenient as possible. The more effort it takes to engage in the bad habit, the less likely you are to do it.
So if I'm trying to cut back on watching TV, I might hide the remote control or unplug the TV after each use.
Those are great examples. Or if you're trying to reduce your phone usage, you could put your phone in a different room or turn off notifications.
It's about creating those little obstacles that make it harder to give in to temptation.
Exactly. And finally, let's talk about how to make a bad habit unsatisfying. Remember how we talked about rewarding ourselves for good habits? Well, the same principle applies here, but in reverse. If you want to break a bad habit, you need to associate it with negative consequences.
So if I bite my nails, I might put on some bitter-tasting nail polish to make the experience unpleasant.
That's a great idea. Or, if you're trying to break a habit of procrastination, you might set deadlines for yourself and impose consequences for not meeting them.
It's like giving yourself a little punishment for indulging in the bad habit.
In a way, yes. It's about creating a negative feedback loop that makes the habit less appealing over time.
This is all so incredibly insightful. I'm already thinking about all the ways I can apply these laws to break those pesky bad habits that have been holding me back.
That's fantastic. And remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about progress, not perfection. Every small step you take towards breaking a bad habit is a victory worth celebrating.
I love that. This has been such an empowering deep dive into the 4 laws of behavior change. It's incredible how much control we have over our habits when we understand the underlying mechanisms.
I agree, it's all about becoming the architect of our own lives. And speaking of architecture, there's one more crucial piece of the puzzle we need to explore: identity.
Ah, yes. Identity. This
What?
is where things get really deep and personal. Tell me more about how identity plays into habit formation.
This is where the real magic happens. Because, as James Clear points out in Atomic Habits, true behavior change is actually identity change.
So it's not just about doing the right things, it's about becoming the kind of person who does those things naturally.
Precisely. Imagine someone who identifies as a runner. They don't have to force themselves to go for a run. It's simply part of who they are. It's an expression of their identity.
Like their identity fuels their actions. And the reverse is also true, isn't it? If you identify as someone who always procrastinates or can't resist sweets, you're more likely to act in ways that reinforce those beliefs.
That's the power of identity. It can work for us or against us. And that's why focusing solely on outcomes like losing weight or getting a promotion can fall short. Those are goals, but they don't always address the underlying beliefs that drive our behavior.
So how do we shift our identity to support the habits we want to build?
Well, it starts with small wins, proving to ourselves that we are capable of change. Each time you successfully follow through on a desired behavior, you're casting a vote for the identity you want to embrace.
So it's like building evidence for the kind of person you want to become.
Exactly. Let's say you want to become a writer. Instead of focusing on publishing a novel, start by committing to writing for just 15 minutes each day.
That feels much more attainable.
Right. And each time you sit down and write, you're reinforcing the belief that you are a writer. Over time, those small actions accumulate and your identity starts to shift.
So it's not about perfection, it's about
Yeah.
consistency.
Exactly. Consistency is what builds momentum and strengthens your belief in the new identity you're creating.
This is so empowering. It means we're not stuck with our old habits and limiting beliefs.
Right.
We have the power to change them.
Absolutely. And the more we align our actions with our desired identity, the more effortless those actions become. They're no longer a struggle, they're simply an expression of who we are.
I love how Clear frames this. He says, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Such a powerful reminder that we're constantly shaping our identity through our choices.
It is. And the beautiful thing is that it works both ways. If you want to change your beliefs, start by changing your actions.
So if I want to believe I'm a healthy person, I can start by consistently making healthy choices.
Exactly. And as you see yourself making those choices over and over again, your belief in that identity will naturally strengthen.
This is so incredibly hopeful. It means we're not limited by our past or our current circumstances. We have the power to create the future we want by consciously shaping our identity.
And remember, identity is not a fixed destination. It's an ongoing process of evolution and growth.
That's a great point. We're always becoming. It's not about reaching some perfect end state, but rather embracing the journey of continuous improvement.
Exactly. And that journey starts with those small, seemingly insignificant actions that we take each day.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive into the world of habit formation. It's truly transformative to understand not only the mechanics of how habits work, but also the power of belief and identity in shaping our behavior.
I couldn't agree more. It's been a pleasure exploring these concepts with you.
And to our amazing listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you valuable insights into the power of habits and the tools you need to start designing a life that truly reflects the best version of yourself.
Before we sign off, here's a final thought to ponder. What small action could you take today to reinforce the identity you want to create?
Remember, even tiny steps in the right direction can lead to massive transformations over time. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Chapters Unfolded for more deep dives into the books that are shaping our lives. We'll see you in the next episode.
Until then, keep unfolding those chapters and keep growing.